Very delighted to introduce Michael Thomas, who's the director of the Information Security Oversight Office, or the ISOO. I used to literally have "I love the NISPAC" in my bio on clearancejobs.com, and that's because the NISPAC and the ISOO are so important, not just to declassification, classification policy, clearance reform, but transparency and understanding of that process. So I am always really excited to highlight the work that they are doing. They are small, unsung heroes of the security space. So thank you so much, Michael, for being here. Appreciate it. Come on.
I should have gotten closer to the podium earlier. I think I had a better haircut then. I don't know. Anyway, thank you so much for welcoming me here today. And Lindy, thank you for the kind invitation. I know we probably have a room full of serious ISOO fans out there. It's America's most well-known sub-element of an unlikely agency. So maybe we could start by doing a little stage setting here. Then we can get to who the players and characters are and what sort of drama that we can expect. But let's just start with the bigger picture. And I want to maybe start as where I come to you today from, which is the National Archives. Maybe some of you have visited our building downtown in Washington, D.C. If you've ever gone in the Pennsylvania Avenue side, that would be not the Gen Pop side with the Constitution and the Declaration, but this is where you would go to do research or come into a meeting. You may have noticed there are these enormous sculptures there right on Pennsylvania Avenue. They were crafted by a fellow named Robert Aiken, who's more famous for designing the facade of the Supreme Court. But these statues weigh 65 tons, all Indiana limestone. And on the one side, you have an old man with his hands laid upon a closed book, meditating on the past. And across the way, you have a young woman with a book open on her lap, symbolizing the potential of the unwritten future. And beneath her feet, there's an inscription. Familiar lines. What is past is prologue. Now, it's a pretty familiar phrase, but you may not know that it's taken from Shakespeare's The Tempest play. And you certainly probably aren't familiar with, I certainly wasn't, that the original context for the phrase is murder. So, shocking, perhaps. Where is this talk going? I know, I promise. I'll get to the point. So appropriate for me anyway, because I certainly killed a lot of time under those statues in my 20s. See, this is not the first time that I've called the National Archives home. I had my first job out of school at the National Archives. Just as I was finishing, I met a girl in my philosophy of law class, and she said she'd get me a summer job. And that turned into an opportunity to work at the archives, which turned into my first job as a real deal federal employee. And, that job is barely a blip on my resume today. I won't tell you how many years later, but it did start my career on a long and circuitous path, started knocking down the dominoes in a certain way that led me all the way back around to the National Archives to become the director of the Information Security Oversight Office. Now, maybe the most wild of these twists and turns, the most consequential thing that happened when Erin Renee Rossiter set my career off on this path accidentally was that I became a spy. About a dozen years ago, I was actually out of work. There's a whole story there. It's not time for that level of vulnerability between us. Maybe about 30 minutes in, we can get to it. But I applied for a job at the Director of National Intelligence, and they accepted me. And I joined the DNI to lead essentially their digital strategy. Definitely didn't see it coming. Definitely didn't prepare for it. Was the first time in my career that I used my international affairs degree, so that was solid. Anyway. So it isn't all as it sounds. Just like David said a few minutes ago, everybody who enters this cleared community gets cleared. We have the same standards, the same background investigation, but I wasn't necessarily your typical kind of spy. I was more of your friendly neighborhood spy, the spy that helped all the other spies get in touch with their feelings and share more at story time. It was my job to figure out how we were going to communicate with the public in lots of different contexts, including things like recruiting. And this was all well and good, but I had only just had enough time at the Director of National Intelligence to get my feet under me when this fellow named Edward Snowden hopped a plane out of the country, and in his carry-on bag, he held a mountain of America's secrets. And all of a sudden, all this stuff that had been nice to have in terms of how we're going to engage with people and how they're going to help them understand us became mission critical, because the public turns out, does not trust us. They do not necessarily trust things they don't understand. They don't trust people they don't know. And I spent the next 7 or so years deeply invested in these issues of transparency and trust. How can the intelligence community, really the clear community at large, because I come from a vantage point of the intelligence community, but we're really talking about capabilities and roles that stretch all the way across the national security apparatus and well into industry beyond the confines of government, right? How can we do this better? How can we communicate better? How can we be more accountable? How can we share more and generate a trusting relationship with the public? This became entirely critical. And what I found was that it was the same as when I'd worked in the private sector, that even when I had a great product to sell, even when I had a winning strategy, to be really successful, I had to invest in making my clients, in this case, the 17 elements, now it's 18, welcome aboard Space Force, elements of the intelligence community into better customers. And that meant I had to work my way up the ladder from framing the messages that we share to creating new tools that will enable us to do that better, and eventually to establishing new policies and processes that would help us move information through the system more efficiently. And that explains how I ended up, again, accidentally, I met another girl. This one was married. It was all good. We worked together in 2019 and had on the Argentina declassification project. And in 2023, she reached out to me after a couple of years of not being in touch and said, would you like to come to work with me at the National Security Council? We're working on information policy. We want to reform the rules that govern this information. And if information can't flow, nothing else flows, right? We all know this. And of course, I said yes. And that's how I took my deep dive into the underlying policies that frame how our government manages its sensitive information. And that was the perfect environment to prepare me for my current role as the director of the Information Security Office. ISOO, among other things, oversees America's classified national security information and controlled unclassified information programs. The office has its origins in the Nixon administration's Interagency Committee on Classification, which was based out of the White House. ISOO itself was formally created by President Carter via executive order in 1978. And we're here to ensure that the government appropriately protects and properly affords access to information that advances the national and public interest. And we take our policy direction from the president and the National Security Advisor. Now, that includes the information that we share with the public. That includes the information that we need to move across and around government. That includes the information that we need to share with industry to maintain our capabilities and with our foreign partners. Many different valences to what it means to judiciously share this information. And since its establishment, ISOO has issued a report annually to the president, including statistics, analysis, and inspection data to support and inform decision-making on the management of these uniquely valuable resources. And I'm very glad to say, very glad to say that our report for fiscal year 24 was formally released just yesterday. We documented many different evolutions of our work here at ISOO in that particular report, inspection procedures and things like that. But I think the most significant thing that we were able to do is completely reformat how we present our information to the public, how we explain our mission, what it is that we do here, as they say, to the Bobs. In considering how to approach this, I went back and looked at every ISOO annual report going back to 1979, and it was quite fascinating to observe how the mission has evolved over the years and the different ways that we've tried to explain it to the public and, of course, to the president, who's the primary audience for this report. Not to mention, it was a truly wild ride through the history of civic information design. If you're into that sort of thing, I recommend fiscal year 1988 and 1999 as particularly solid examples. If someone were to perform a similar bit of bureaucratic spelunking in the years ahead, they would find that in fiscal year 2024, in perusing ISOO's digital catacombs, that this was the year that ISOO first sort of translated its mission, which is derived from a slew of executive orders and regulations dealing with all sorts of different bits and bobs of information across government. We broke it into 4 areas: oversight and compliance, guidance and implementation, data collection and analysis, and administration and engagement. These core duties cut across ISOO's underlying authorities to consolidate what have historically been considered as an array of separate administrative programs like the NISPAC that Lundy mentioned, as well as information silos. Is it classified? Is it controlled unclassified information? And that's everyone's favorite program. So I think in doing this, we'll make our work more accessible, more intelligible as we explain the how and the why that we do what we do. But more importantly, this is going to help ISOO better capture and convey the realities and risks of our modern data environment, something that we all suffer through daily. We are signaling with this report a shift in how we need to view this universe of information that the government creates and manages and shares. Doing that effectively for the next decade is going to require more robust, automated, and interconnected tools. We'll have to look at this in a holistic way that includes the intersection of our information policy with the work that, well, all of you are a part of across government, whether that be in personnel or security or recruiting. If the information doesn't flow, nothing moves, right? This is an opportunity in modernizing this information environment we all live in, getting information into the hands of those that need it and keeping it out of the hands of those that don't. It'll help us maximize the value of the information and as well as lubricate a litany of business processes within and beyond government. Now, while ISOO's reports reach back to 1979, our roots run much deeper. In fact, our mission is as old as our nation, ensuring that the information generated by the American government, this unique and uniquely valuable national resource, is both assiduously protected and judiciously shared. This is actually a responsibility enshrined in the Declaration of Independence itself, which, while drafted in the deepest secrecy, plotting treason against the crown is generally bad for your health, it actually includes in its text a formal obligation to publish and declare its contents, marking America's fundamental commitment to transparency at the moment and in the mechanism of our founding. When you next have the opportunity to visit the National Archives, along with making that mandatory spin through the rotunda to see the Declaration in person, take time and look at the ornate sculptures that grace the pediment over that entrance on Pennsylvania Avenue. You'll be standing right between those two statues. When you look up, you'll see this extraordinary frieze, and in each corner, there is a griffin facing into the center, framing the entire scene. Now, according to the sculptor Adolf Weissman, these are canonically the guardians of the secrets of the archives. That's ISOO. The National Archives is responsible for all government information, and we are there to draw the line between what gets released and what needs to be held and for how long. We've been a part of America's story since day one, and we are so integral to its telling that they engraved us in stone on the face of the majestic building that we call our home. Now, that might sound glib or self-congratulatory. I think it's pretty cool, but I want you to know I also brought receipts. President Franklin Roosevelt may have issued the first executive order on classification in 1940, and President Truman, with the National Security Act of 1947, this one was a banger, may have given shape to our modern military and intelligence apparatus, creating the Joint Chiefs, creating the National Security Council, creating this little research organization you may have heard of called the CIA. But our first spy master was General George Washington. His Culper ring, run by Major Benjamin Talmadge, was America's earliest formalized intelligence network. And they had all the things you might think. They had invisible links and secret codes. They had confidential informants. They had an utter need for secrecy. You'll also find the earliest hints of our modern information security classification system all the way back in the Federalist Papers, these arguments all written under pseudonyms that undergird the contents of our Constitution. It's in Federalist Paper 64. Any Federalist Paper 64 fans in the room? Probably not. I just say it to myself before I go to bed every night. It's fine. This one was written by John Jay, Supreme Court Justice, Governor of New York, also America's first counterintelligence official. That's worth looking into. But this Federalist paper talks about the need for efficient, secret communication on behalf of the government. And here we are, still talking about that today. What is past is prologue, indeed. Now, I've spent a lot of time in the last few minutes talking about history, and that's what you get when you invite someone from the National Archives. They don't approve these as speaking engagements unless we agree to mention the Constitution at least twice. But I do believe that making forward progress always requires just the right amount of looking back critically. We have to know where we've been to understand where we are and where we need to go. And to that end, I hope if you spend any time at all today with the ISOO Annual Report, that you'll take a look at the letter to the president that opens the document. It's a concise look at where I believe our mission is headed. And not just my mission, our mission, because these things that we talk about impact us all. We are, I think no one would disagree, in a moment of epochal technological change. And to meet this moment, our current ideas, our current concepts for information management have to evolve. We have to modernize our information security policies and practices and our infrastructure to serve a new landscape of threats, challenges, and opportunities. We must empower our organizations to move information at the speed of mission, bringing to bear advanced technologies. These measures will enable true progress towards resolving long-standing systemic issues of overclassification, infrastructure fragmentation, and the failure to provide ready access to information. No promises on that personnel security vetting timeline. That's somebody else's job. But these issues, if left unaddressed, will simultaneously continue to erode public trust and also put our national security at risk. The challenge is substantial. To shift the structures and perhaps even more importantly, the cultures of a system that has operated largely unchanged for over 70 years since the Truman administration. But it's a challenge that I think is more than balanced by the scale of the opportunity that awaits us if we can unlock the full value of this information that we generate and manage and share, making good on our promise of efficient, effective government, and in so doing, advancing America's security, prosperity, and values. That is what I think lies ahead of us if we play our cards right. And I look forward to exploring it with all of you. Now, having set the stage, having told you where I stand, but not really elaborated on all the touch points that engage with the work that you do, I would love to spend a few minutes in dialogue to hear what your concerns are and maybe try to draw some brighter lines between what your challenges are every day and how we at ISOO can help you address them. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions? I have so many. You're my favorite. So anybody? Bueller? Can you give us some of the highlights from the annual report? I mean, I assume obviously everybody's going to read all 53 pages as they go home today. But if we had to take a few takeaways that you think this room should know about, what are they?
Yeah, there's probably two. I mean, first, I mentioned in the remarks that I think along with reformatting the report to align our mission around our areas of activity, as opposed to a litany of executive orders and responsibilities, I think that's a powerful change to narrate our story better for the public. Part of that was we have a new administration coming in that we need to sort of set a new bar for how we're describing ourselves and describing our value. But also, the report over time had moved in a direction where it assumed an expert audience for everything that we do. Everybody knows Executive Order 13526 or 13556 and so on and so forth. I can't even name them all. I don't think we can assume that anymore. So those are massive changes to the way that we've chosen to represent ourselves and present information and take responsibility for these systems that we oversee. A second that you'll see reflected in the report is the way that we have revamped our inspection process. ISOO has been doing inspections as long as it's existed, but for the last fiscal year, and it'll be fully implemented in FY25, we've really created a much more substantial rubric. So this is one of these places where ISOO's responsibilities really help us look at in an integrated fashion all the layers of the security. People say onion. I prefer pancakes. Just picture all those security pancakes stacked up high and deep. Anyway, and so we're doing a lot better job of creating a rubric for agencies to understand where problems lie, to isolate where they need to make changes, and for ISOO to collect data over time about where we're seeing problems systemically, which is not something that I think we've done quite as effectively as we could have over, say, the last 4 or 5 years. Certainly since the pandemic, I think we're all still in a bit of a recovery, getting our organizations back to where they should be. So I think that's a major change. And really the third one that I'd like to articulate for you is one that is merely set the stage for in this year's report. Where I'd like to see this report and ISOO's activities in general move in the next year, in the next several years, is in a more strategic direction. Instead of being a litany of the work that we've done and the way that we've engaged with folks like you in our various capacities, I want us to be able to better provide a strategic picture of how these systems are operating. We have obligations under the law to collect all sorts of data from federal agencies. But much of that data is very difficult or impossible to collect. Things like we have an obligation to capture what are the number of derivative classification decisions that were made in the DoD over a given year. Do you think anyone knows that number? I don't think that we do. I don't think that it's tracked in a way. But when we're talking about this opportunity to automate, and we're talking about bringing technology to bear on these problems, this is about more than laying down or lifting boxes. This is about more than processing a security clearance. This is about making sure that oversight continues to be effective in a digital age. This is about how ISOO, in taking responsibility for owning this information. Take the CUI registry, for example. Any CUI registry fans in the audience? Just one. She's from ISOO. She has to say that. The CUI registry is meant to be a catalog of all the different categories of unclassified but sensitive information that the government needs to maintain control of, sharing between agencies, sharing with industry, sharing with different places with respect to law, regulation, or government-wide policy. What's in the CUI registry? What government agencies told us should be in there. But that's not every law that has relevance to protecting information. We just had a case in the last week where a group came to us about problems moving information sort of to state, local, and tribal partners, which is another tiny hat that I wear. And what we're able to find is that the actual law that would govern that information really isn't represented under any of the CUI categories. So we know we're missing pieces. There's information that should be protected in specific ways or shareable in certain ways that we've not captured because agencies aren't deploying it. So that law either needs to change or it needs to be documented because we want to make sure we're protecting everything that needs to be protected in the most concise and precise manner. All to say, the next step for ISOO is making sure that oversight, both integral to ourselves and across this community of sort of national security information users, controlled information users across government, which is virtually all of us, that they have the tools to understand what's happening in their organizations. I think that's the biggest change that lies in front of us that is sort of forecast by this report, Lindy.
Another question? No, oh, well.
I was just wondering, you made mention of security pancakes. So where do you see industrial security in that pancake layer, and what do you see moving forward that can help us help you?
Thank you so much. That's a great question. I want us all to, if you take nothing away from this talk today, make it security pancake, please. That's let that be my legacy. This is a new area for me, and I have had quite the education, thanks to Heather on my team, as well as members of the NISPAC and the industry groups that I have the pleasure of engaging with. And so what I look at this as in terms of my role at ISOO is how can I be an enabler? You know, we have this particular role under executive order to be the conduit point, sort of acting as the chair of an advisory committee, where we have sort of largely DoD, but also the IC, generally government on one side and industry on the other. And we try to provide honest brokerage between, how the mission gets accomplished and what industry needs to get there, and sort of wrangling the necessary tensions. And how do we translate that back into policy? Whether that is, what do government agencies need to provide that they're not providing? How does the regulatory environment need to change? Do we need to go back to an executive order and recommend changes there? One of the specific roles that we have at ISOO, well, number one, we take complaints, all comers, and two is that under the NISP, the National Industrial Security Program executive order, I have an obligation to bring recommendations to the National Security Advisor and the President. So the best way that you can help me is to help me with an open dialogue to understand what problems you're seeing so that we can align those to sort of what level we think we can make change to address those challenges. That will both help me personally because I need to learn in this space, but it will also help the experts that we have who know these issues well to align them to where we can actually see those changes enacted. So I think that would be the most helpful thing. Thank you.
Okay, I think we have time for one last question. Who's going to be the winner? Otherwise, I'm going to make him talk about controlled unclassified information. Going once, going twice. Okay, talk about CUI. I hate it, but I know you like it. So let's talk about more, because I feel like that probably affects a lot of folks in this room. If it's unclassified, why for the love of Pete do we have to control it, Michael?
Well, here you go. So when you say that I love it, I believe in it. I'm not just saying that because as the executive agent, they made me the head of the church. But I'd like to think there's a few CUI faithful in the audience. CUI includes your social security number. You probably don't want that uncontrolled. CUI includes your tax information. You probably don't want that uncontrolled. CUI includes all sorts of national security information like naval nuclear propulsion, critical infrastructure. I don't think we want these things uncontrolled. I think the challenge that we have is the executive order is many years old, and that we have not yet had additional policy changes in that area to refine the initial idea. And I think that this is one of these places where we have massive cultural changes along with structural changes. The cost of adjusting a marking tool versus the way agencies think about the information. I think one of the benefits of CUI is I come from, and I'll say I am as some people convert or late in life, going into the intelligence community. My bread and butter is FOUO when it comes to protecting information at the unclassified level. But I'm here to tell you that one of the benefits of CUI is that it is aligned to a variety of security layers, right? It's telling you that CUI information has to ride on systems that meet these particular standards. FOUO, it's just vibes. And I'm not sure that's where we want to be looking into the future. It's not to say that the program says that you must get rid of this marking, that you can't continue to use the markings that you might use internally. But we want to make sure those markings are intelligible agency to agency, and that, again, information can move, but only so far as it needs to relative to the laws, regulations, and government-wide policies that govern it. So I think there's room for refinement. I think there is definitely room on ISOO's part to help broker this cultural change in a way that we haven't in the last few years. But if anybody's got particular gripes, again, I do take complaints and we do investigate them. So I'm glad to hear from you if you have a specific concern about the way CUI is being managed in your agency or between agencies. We certainly hear them. And most of the time when I hear them, I'm thinking, well, someone's not implemented the program correctly, which is why we track that. You can read all about it in the annual report. Who's got the program implemented, what aspects of it they have left to do, when they're telling us it'll be done. So we know exactly where across government where we're seeing people who are complete, incomplete, and this is a part of the inspections that we do to go in and make sure these programs are operating as they should. So my hope is that we'll be able to continue to ensure that agencies are doing it properly, which I think will deal with a lot of the frustration, and at the same time, over the next few years, have an opportunity for further refinement to the program in a positive way. I actually think there are remarkable things we can do with automation in the CUI space, given that it all exists in the unclassified environment. That's a place we can bring these technologies to bear right now. In fact, if you look around government, you might find agencies that are doing some really miraculous things that'll be a model for where we'll all be in the next 5 years.
Okay, you got me. Yes. I am a little excited. AI and automation as a testbed in CUI before we, unleash some of those capabilities in the classified space. Thank you so much, Michael Thomas. Maybe if I call CUI a pancake and put syrup on it, then I would also like it better. So thank you so much.
Thank you.